Chief Meteorologist Matt Lopon here as we are tracking a potential for some active weather again into your Saturday. Thinking is that severe weather is once again possible. Still assessing how that threat's going to kind of play out here because, like has been the case for the last few days, it's a whole butterfly effect sort of thing. You know, one day to the next to the next, it's all kind of linked up on how this all plays out. So let's look kind of here at where things stand as of this evening. Um, Pretty warm out there. Appreciate y'all for your patience, over the last few days here. Hopefully, we don't do a whole lot more of this. I think we definitely get things a little bit more manageable in the extended forecast. Let's just say that, thankfully. So, warm out there this evening. Still, well, I didn't mean to click on 12-hour rainfall, but that might not be a bad thing to actually have clicked on here. Give me a moment. Because the rainfall has been very significant and the flash flooding threat the greatest at this nearer term out to the west and up the north, where they've just had just excessive amounts of rainfall this week. Um, the moisture, the fuel for thunderstorms is still very much there, but we don't have the right kind of lifting mechanism overnight. It'll be tomorrow before we kind of see that happen again, because you can see plenty of that green, plenty of that moisture around to help fuel the thunderstorms from tomorrow. That's not necessarily the limiting factor. It's kind of how everything else related to this comes together. Um, the severe risk as it stands now, again, level 3 risk for about half of the area, primarily because of the potential for strong and damaging winds. Um, but let's look at some of the forecast projections here, because it takes till about this time of the evening before they really kind of start to come in. First off, overdoing the storms that we have out there right now, just out the gate. Um, so, of course, something to keep in mind. You'll notice, again, all the flash flood warnings, all that back to the west there. Not a lot of storms over top of us. When the model immediately is kind of overdoing what you have out there, it's a hopeful sign. Maybe it overdoes it once it really matters. But you'll note very little really kind of developing overnight here. Um, so 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, unlike the last, well, certainly midweek where we had major issues. That's not the case this time around as we look into tonight. I think we're pretty much in good shape. Now, this particular version of Storm Tracker does develop what we would call elevated storms. These are not forming in the boundary layer. They're forming kind of on what could best be described as the front above the surface. You have the near surface front that lifts it, and then, if you get rotation, it gets to the surface. That's not what these are. These are look to be elevated storms there in the first part of early tomorrow. Some question as to whether or not these are. I would say these are probably surface based out to the west of us as we go toward tomorrow into the afternoon. This is one of our latest looks at the models here. Does have a couple of isolated storms trying to develop into the area 2, 3 o'clock, but you can see solidly at that point the primary risk for any kind of active and severe weather is going to be out to the west of us. I'm going to look at the fuel for these thunderstorms. That's another way to kind of look at this, and I think this should be my longer. Give me a moment. Like, yeah, I just want to double check. This is my kind of longer range version here. Um, and so again, all that stuff mainly to the north and west. This does have a little heavier on that kind of morning. And this is, hold on, let's force this. Let's make sure this is on the latest one here. That's a little different than we were looking at just a moment ago there. Okay, so first off, would be largely, well, I mean, if I look at this, you could argue that's surface based, even 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning tomorrow. Um, so how strong is that initial batch there? Typically, I would be underimpressed, but this has been one of those weeks. So, um, stronger winds would be the main impact if we were to see something on that. What I get concerned with, what I get interested in here, is you see how it kind of has this sort of quasi front here. This is the main front back to the west, but this kind of somewhat east-west boundary there. When I see those, I get concerned that storms could potentially attach that boundary, and then you get some extra rotation that happens with that. So some questions. I don't know that our winds aloft perfectly align with that, um, but that's something to definitely watch. Notice as we go into the afternoon, that's when we start to see some individual thunderstorms. A greater number of those individual thunderstorms down here back to the south and west. These would be more your discrete tornado-producing thunderstorms, which is why, give me a second to hop over and then hop back. That's part of the reason why the primary tornado risk is down in this zone back to the south and west there, is because that's those individual discrete storms, a greater potential to see those. Without those, we're going to have kind of more of a wind component trying to spin up tornadoes. Could still be strong tornadoes spinning up, but tornadoes typically with the individual cells are the ones obviously we have to watch a little closer. Now back over to that same version of the HRRR that we were looking at a moment ago, or Storm Tracker as we kind of title it. Um, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock. You kind of have this stronger band of strong winds up near the Tennessee state line. A few individual thunderstorms. Watching those back toward Meridian there. If we, a lot of times we'll get like a fetch of moisture, just like a spot where we kind of have um, extra. See if that's not set up scenario. Extra moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico like that. And so you end up with your storms like hitting one of those bands, and sometimes that can be an extra enhancement for those. So that's one of the things we're watching. It's interesting that 7:30, I basically have an east-west line here on the trailing edge of um, this initial wave. The point of that being there'll kind of be a cutoff where if you're anywhere in the black area here, you're largely done unless that warm sector can push north. Now notice it does try to do something like that overnight there, closer to say Golden Triangle, Lamar County, Alabama. Let's go back over and show kind of the precipitation on there as well. That's really as kind of the line hits. So even though this is just a line that comes in kind of at the back end of this, we're showing 11 o'clock there. Um, the fact that I have kind of a zone here where we do see an extra enhancement near the Alabama state line, where we could have some of those stronger winds as well, that just kind of presents a scenario where sometimes you get a little extra spin there to try to spin up a tornado, kind of right at that inflection point. So that is one of our concerns, that could be the case as well with this. But I mean, largely this is, as you'll note there, a big old line with some areas where we do have bits of rotation along kind of the leading edge. So that'd be more spin up style tornadoes in that case. Again, that kind of verifies what I'm looking at here, which is really south and west, the primary zone. I do think they've done a great job after what's a long week, kind of painting in that primary zone where there's greater potential maybe for those individual storm cells down in this area here. Now, I don't think they're going to take the orange all the way east, so don't misunderstand me there. But to say that in this zone there's kind of a south of whatever that kind of boundary is, where you're most likely to end up seeing some kind of rotating supercells, kind of out by themselves, and actually, additionally, the extra shear to get them going with the line as well. So kind of back over to that version of Storm Tracker we're looking at a minute ago here, or the HRRR. Again, get it back up close to that time that we're looking at. We also do have some of these merging cells, 5 to 6 o'clock. Anytime you're merging cells into a line, sometimes this has an extra little bit of spin. And I'll bet when we look at rotation, we'll see some rotation tracks in there with that as well. The fact you also get hours of precipitation there means there's probably also some flooding potential with that as well. Let's see if we have HRRR. Give me a moment here. And let's see if I've got the extended on there. See if that'll populate. Give it a second here to get all that data in there. Let's go next. Let's go next 36 hours. See if that'll populate the data in. Oh, I guess I have to click it on. That would definitely help. So we have that there, and I think there we go. Okay. So there you go. So there's the concern when you start get those training echoes there. I mean, that shows a lot of very heavy rainfall. And where we see some of those purples in there, that's, I mean, maybe overdone, but that tells you with hours and hours and hours of rainfall, you could be talking about flooding rainfall, significant flooding rainfall out of this, if the projection we're looking at here ends up being the one that we end up seeing. So, don't want to miss that. I want to make sure we say that before we kind of walk through the rest of this. Because that would be a concern, obviously. So let's look at kind of where this is depicting, in particular, what we call the significant tornado parameter. It's something that I don't show quite as often, but I do want to look at here. I'm going to get rid of CAPE for a moment. I'll leave SYN on there. And I'm going to, there we are, as that populates in. Let's go ahead and, well, we can probably put the precipitation back on top. And let's half fade that off. I think that'll kind of give us an idea. I know we've got a lot of stuff layered on here, but that's how I'm going to sort through what we're looking at. So you can tell that again, this does kick out some higher levels of this, what we call significant tornado parameter, right at the leading edge of this. That's to be expected. That tells us that there's a damaging wind and also potentially tornado spin up sort of threat along the front end here. It's still possible that the tornado spins up, an EF2 or greater potential. So that's absolutely on the table, but there's some questions whether or not you can see as that kind of kicks through how that really ratchets down. Whereas back toward Louisiana, you have that higher risk in there. You do see also this kind of surge where there's this zone south of that boundary we were talking about, where some of those storms trying to move into that line could still have enhanced rotation. What I'm looking for here is when we get closer to midnight. See that little bump up we get right there? That's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning tomorrow night. Um, I don't know. I just feel like if the model's correct on that extra little surge and where it's placing those storms over there, that there will still be a tornado threat that continues after midnight tomorrow night. So that is one of the things that I'm definitely watching on there, kind of with that line. I think certainly some strong wind gusts to go along with that as well. Damaging wind gusts in excess of 70 miles per hour, I'd say, is the main impact a lot of us end up seeing more than even the tornado threat. And then as this kind of passes through, you can see there will be some showers behind it as we go into your Sunday, but no severe weather threat. We're drier beyond that point. Um, One other projection I want to check here if I can force it to the latest run, because again, this model's coming in as we speak. So that's what kind of happens this time of night is all my projections kind of come in at the last second here. I love the time change in that the sun stays out a little later. But as far as forecasting goes, it makes my job harder for sure. Okay, now this projection has consistently been faster. And what that does is that, kicks this line through 6, 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, and we get to this black zone. Black is good in this case. That means there's no fuel around. There is just that tiniest little bit of surge around 2 a.m. that this also sees. And so despite the fact I don't agree with a lot of what this shows, I think the timing is too fast. The fact that it has that extra little surge there enhances my concern for the post-midnight time period tomorrow night, and how that could end up playing in with this, as if we haven't had enough nighttime stuff lately. Hold on a second here. Okay. Sorry, reading our discussion with the Weather Service, making sure that they're talking about Arkansas stuff over there. Um, so all of that to say, I again still think I can kind of throw this projection out. I think its timing is too fast. But you can see how it is primarily a line with spin-ups with it, even though its timing's too fast. And then south of that line down here is where you have more of the individual thunderstorms. Even it does not do as an aggressive job producing individual thunderstorms. It's primarily the line with spin-ups. So fingers crossed that is a better solution for us, but I still anticipate we'll probably see certainly tornado watches after the week we've had. I do not think they'll play it conservative for tomorrow, nor do I think they should. But I do think, again, going back to a lot of times we talk about how would I change this graphic here. Um, I don't know that I necessarily would. I think that I fairly agree. Maybe you could pull this over a little farther east. But I think I largely agree with both that and where it's placing the tornado and the strong tornado threats. The exception might be I would be willing to probably pull this yellow over just a little bit farther to the east. I think you could have an intersection here in the after midnight time period tomorrow where we should have a slightly higher risk than what it's indicating for kind of some of these locations. But that's that's nitpicky. The reality is, I think they did a fairly decent job. I do think that they would probably have to migrate the tornado risk a little farther east based on what we're looking at. But I do not think it, warrants a 4 or 5 upgrade for our area, anything like that. Maybe pulling the 3 up a little bit more. I think the strong tornado threat's probably fairly well placed with this. That's not to say you couldn't have something isolated strong a little farther east, but the likelihood of a lot of that outside of just one storm isn't quite as high. So. Um, that's our generalized update here. I got to clean this up so we can broadcast it. We're only 10 minutes away from the newscast, so I got to get you a cleaner version. I'm kind of trying to get some things done behind the scenes here. But takeaway, certainly we've got to be watching tomorrow. It's probably going to end up being a fairly active day once again. No shock there. Has been the case, and it's obviously for some folks, like Columbus or Starkville or Louisville that have maybe had a quick rumble and that's been it. this will be the most impactful thing we've kind of had all week. The flooding rainfall potential, though, on the north side of this, something that is concerning. I'm going to have to address that in what we talk about coming up at 10 o'clock. But that, as we've talked about over and over again, that's always been kind of a big part of it. I'm going to pray we're going to send it on our way because I got to get a lot done in about 10 minutes. So, God, protect us, guide us, help give me the words to both calm people's nerves, but also keep them aware of what's going on. I know that everybody, including myself, is done with this pattern. Um, so if we could just get through this without anything too terribly bad, that's always something I'd appreciate. But this time around, can we just be a big rainball and be done? Um, your will be done no matter what. But God, protect these people. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with them. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we are going to be, of course, doing all the stuff here at 10 o'clock. So join us, and we'll see you then. Just a moment.